It's my fault. I was supposed to do a Halloween special in the last episode, but I mixed up the dates. Sorry about that. So, I hope this video can bring back some of the Halloween atmosphere that's still lingering. In China, the closest equivalent to Halloween is the Ghost Festival on the 15th of the 7th lunar month. But our festival isn't a cheerful occasion. It's actually a day when people can easily encounter some supernatural events. So, this episode includes 3 real terrifying experiences from Chinese netizens during the Ghost Festival. As usual, I'll give a 5-second jump scare warning marked by this symbol. Alright, let's get started. It was around 2012 and I was just 19. After graduating, I started working as a patrol officer. My daily routine was to ride around on a motorcycle, dealing with things like street brawls. During my second year on the job, I started to work the night shift. Unfortunately, the first time was on the Ghost Festival. I was cursing my luck, but I was also secretly glad because not many people go out during this day, so that usually means fewer incidents to handle. So I got on motorcycle, just riding around aimlessly with my colleague Liu. Around 1:40 in the morning, my walkie-talkie crackled to life with a report from the command center. Attention, Patrol 102. There's been a report of a fight at the old crematorium. Please go check it out. Without hesitation, I acknowledged the call, revved my engine, and headed straight for the scene. The old crematorium was on the outskirts of our town, practically bordering the countryside, so it was a deserted, desolate place. In my 2 years on the job, I'd never once gotten a call from there. But now, of all times, there was an incident on Ghost Festival night. I had a bad feeling about it. As Liu and I rode, the road got darker and darker. By the last 500 meters, there weren't even any streetlights, just our bike headlights cutting through the blackness, lighting up a small patch ahead of us. When we got to the site, we realized the old crematorium had been demolished long ago. All that was left was a large raised platform about a meter off the ground, covered in tiles. A fight here? No way. But, as usual, we checked the area. No sign of a fight. We didn't even see a ghost. So I radioed the command center. This is Patrol 102. No signs of any incident at the old crematorium. The place is empty. Can you try contacting the caller again? A couple of minutes later, the command center called back, saying, That's odd. We tried calling the number, but he says it's disconnected. Here, let me give you the number. See if you can reach it. Both Liu and I tried calling, but got the same result, disconnected. We were annoyed, thinking someone must be playing a prank, calling 110 in the middle of the night, then setting their number to appear disconnected. Whoever was behind it, we must track them down and punish them. At that time, Liu, who was a strong but timid guy, starting to get spooked, asked, What now? Should we head back? There's nothing here anyway. Let's check with the command center first. Command, the number is definitely disconnected. What should we do now? But before they could answer, our squad leader's voice cut in. Get back here now. This call is cancelled. His voice was sharp and urgent, which startled both of us. Just as I was about to respond, my walkie-talkie beeped twice and then went dead. That didn't make sense. I charged it fully before heading out. How could it die after just 3 hours? I tried turning it back on, but nothing happened. I even took out the battery and put it back in, but still, nothing. Liu stared at me, confused. Don't worry, I'll call him on the phone. But when he took out his phone, it wouldn't turn on either. I quickly put on mine and same thing. No power, no response. I was at a loss. Liu and I exchanged glances, and without saying a word, we knew exactly what to do. Get out of here. We jumped on our bike, ready to leave. But then, something strange happened. The bike wouldn't start, even the headlights wouldn't come on. Now we were both panicking. I got off the bike, clutching the dead walkie-talkie, and started running. Liu, still holding onto his bike for some reason, began pushing it along as he jogged. We didn't see a word the whole time, just sprinted toward the bend in the road where there were streetlights. cold sweat running down our backs. As I ran, the wind in my ears suddenly vanished, replaced by faint, eerie wailing. It was hard to tell if it was crying or people arguing, but the noise followed me, getting louder and louder. I started being curious about this sound and had a bizarre urge to look back, but sanity told me to stop. Then the voice grew louder, and I felt like something was forcing my head to turn. That's when I realized we should have reached the streetlights by now, but we hadn't. It was like I was running in place, and the harder I ran, the more I wanted to look back. I was just about to give in when Liu suddenly shouted, "Don't look back, just keep running, never turn around." That snapped me out of it. Right, no matter what, I couldn't turn back. I gritted my teeth and kept running. We must have been at it for 20 minutes, but the streetlights were still as far away as when we started. Finally, I stopped, gasping for breath. Liu looked at me, confused. "Why'd you stop?" "There's no point. We're just running in circles. We've been trapped." Liu was drenched in sweat, but he nodded, pulling out a cigarette. "You're right. They say if you encounter something like this, panicking only makes it worse." Actually, the situation was bad, so bad that even his lighter wouldn't work right away. It took forever, but we finally lit our cigarettes, inhaling deeply to steady ourselves. But as soon as we did, the voices behind us got clearer, and Liu said he could hear someone calling his name. My legs were shaking. I'd never been this scared in my life. Quickly, we finished the first cigarette, and when we lit up the second one, a big truck drove by the junction up ahead. I tossed the cigarette, grabbed Liu and said, "Let's make a run for it." Liu, my best teammate, still didn't want to leave the bike behind. Then he pushed it along as we sprinted toward the truck. We finally made it under the streetlights. That short 500-meter stretch felt harder than running a marathon. But even then, the bike still wouldn't start. So we ran another kilometer all the way to the main road, and finally, the creepy voices faded away. At that time, our phones and radios suddenly powered back up, as if nothing had happened. We quickly reported to the leader, who told us to head back to the station, and we hopped back on our bikes and fled. When we met the leader and told him everything, he fell into silence and said nothing. Then he gave us 3 days off and treated us to a meal of ram meat, saying it was helpful to ward off evil spirits. I think he knew something, but as a police officer, he probably couldn't discuss it. All he said was, "Don't talk about this incident to anyone." But this is not the end. A week later, something happened to the squad leader. During our regular firearms training, he was shooting at targets, 10 rounds per magazine, and after he emptied the clip, he casually pointed the gun at his left palm and pulled the trigger, thinking it was empty. But the bullet went straight through his hand, shattering 2 bones. Thing is, where did that 11th bullet come from? The magazines are loaded by our range officers, and they're always double-checked. We even reviewed the footage, and his clip definitely had only 10 rounds. But somehow, he fired an 11th shot. After the accident, the leader was sent to a hospital, and his left hand has been weak ever since. The officer who loaded the gun was suspended, though none of us really knew what happened or why. Okay, let me take a wild guess here. Previously, the captain handled a case where a fight broke out late at night near the old crematorium. In the end, someone was killed on the spot, but the case was closed hastily without any fair judgment from the police. Then, on the Ghost Festival, the deceased spirit, out of a desire for revenge, called the police to lure them into a trap and cause harm. Sensing something was off, the captain immediately ordered the 2 officers to hurry back. So the spirit followed these 2 officers back. Later, during the shooting drill, the ghost arranged for the 11th bullet to be fired, and coincidentally, that bullet hit the captain's right in the palm, which significantly impacted his career. I'm not sure if this counts as a successful revenge. Perhaps this is what they mean by revenge begets revenge. My name is Pei. This story took place in 2009 when I was still working in Shanghai. In September, My good friend Danny and I both decided to resign and go back to hometown for new opportunities. But before we left, we wanted to have some fun. After thinking it over, we decided to visit the ancient city we had long admired, Nanjing. Some of you may remember that 2009 had the leap July in the Chinese lunar calendar, meaning there were 2 July, and thus 2 ghost festivals. Coincidentally, the day we planned to go to Nanjing was the 2nd ghost festival. On that day, Danny, another friend Peach, and I agreed to set off from Shanghai in the morning, aiming to arrive in Nanjing by noon. However, after we boarded the high-speed train, Danny looked a bit gloomy and said, I almost didn't make it out today. I had a fever and my boyfriend wouldn't let me come out to play. As soon as she finished speaking, Peach chimed in. What a coincidence. I also have a fever. We're really unlucky. At that moment, I found it strange. Danny often had health issues and would get fevers frequently. But Peach was as strong as an ox and hadn't been sick in years. I casually asked, How did you get a fever? Did you catch a chill? Peach replied, It was a long story. I was working late last night and got home around 10. On the way, it was so dark that I accidentally stepped into a circle where someone had burned paper money, and then I got a fever when I got home. But it's not too serious, don't worry. When I heard that, I felt something was off. People who burn paper usually draw a circle to indicate that the paper money is only sent to specific souls, so her stepping into it was no different from robbing them halfway. Then I joked, maybe someone thought you were trying to steal money from them and was just messing with you. Everyone brushed it off, and since they seemed fine, we chatted and laughed all the way to Nanjing. Once we arrived in Nanjing, we headed straight to the hotel. The hotel had arranged a triple room for us, but when we got to our room, we found it was at the end of the hall. Danny and I are both particular about such things and didn't want to stay. But there were no other rooms available, so we reluctantly accepted it. We quickly dropped off our bags and went out for dinner. After finished everything, we returned to the hotel and fell asleep. However, I couldn't sleep at all. The room felt oppressively gloomy, and despite its size, there was only a small window letting in minimal light, making the atmosphere feel suffocating. The next morning, I was awakened by the alarm clock and found Danny already up, lying on bed reading a novel. I checked on her, but she seemed downcast. I didn't think much of it, assuming she just felt sick, so I woke up Peach and we set off. That day, we spent some time at Jiming Temple, where we each got a few talismans. After enjoying a pleasant morning, the sun started shining brightly outside, and we decided to go boating at Xuanwu Lake. Strangely, as we walked toward the ticket booth along the lake, I noticed several dead fish floating on the surface. The sight gave me an uneasy feeling. After renting a boat, we slowly made our way to the center of the lake. That afternoon was indeed delightful. Danny and I chatted while rowing, and I dipped my hand into the warm water, enjoying its comfort. When I turned around, Peach was dozing in the sun. We couldn't help but laugh and continue rowing toward the Sun Palace direction. Suddenly, in the middle of the lake, I felt a chill run through me as if the temperature had dropped. Danny sensed the same. When I checked the water, it had gone from warm to ice cold. At that moment, Danny suddenly stopped taking photos and lowered her head, quietly said, I want to go back. I looked at her and noticed her expression was strange. I knew Danny had a unique sensitivity. She could have occasionally seen ghosts. Plus, with her fever, she might not be feeling well. My heart raced at the thought, and without hesitation, I turned the boat around to head back. As I did, the previously calm water started to ripple. Honestly, I felt panicked. The boat didn't have any life jackets, and even if we could swim, reaching the shore from the center of the lake would be impossible. Meanwhile, Danny remained silent, her head down, and I worried she might get worse. Just then, Peach, who had awakened, suddenly asked, Hey, do you guys hear someone laughing? Peach is usually straightforward and rarely jokes, so when I heard her, I turned to Danny, who looked shocked. Clearly, she had already heard it too. My heart leaped into my throat, and I quickly reassured them. No, you must have misheard. There's not a single boat around. Where would the laughter come from? Peach seemed puzzled but stayed quiet. A few minutes later, she yelled, "Seriously, there's a girl laughing. Can't you hear how loud it is?" At that moment, I was terrified. People always say extreme fear can turn into anger, so I turned to Peach, yelling, "What are you talking about? There's no one laughing. You're hearing things. Shut up!" At that point, my hands began to shake. There was still quite a distance to the shore, and waves were crashing against us. The boat swayed several times, and I struggled to stay seated. Danny was almost in tears, asking, "Hey, are we going to make it back?" I forced myself to be brave and said, "No big deal, we'll definitely get back soon." Then I struggled to control the boat and paddled with all my strength. Thankfully, the water calmed down after a while, and we finally reached the shore. As soon as we got off the boat, I sent Peach to retrieve the deposit for the rental while I quietly asked Danny, "Did you see something?" She replied, "Yeah, I saw a very young girl, about 16 or 17, very beautiful, wearing a rose-red hanfu, half of her body in the water, smiling at us from the right side of the boat." I was filled with dread. It was broad daylight, and there was a water ghost in a red dress, smiling. It felt dangerously close, and if she wanted our lives, we probably wouldn't have escaped. Just then, Peach returned, and we instinctively fell silent. However, she wouldn't stop babbling, saying, "There really was a girl laughing just now. Her voice was beautiful. She sounded about 16 or 17, and it came from my right side." Danny and I turned pale, realizing this wasn't just our imagination. Actually, on the first night at the hotel, Danny had already seen shadows moving back and forth in the room, but she was used to such things and didn't wake us, as she sensed no malice. She started reading novel until dawn. This is what she told us about after we returned to Shanghai. Going out on the lake to paddle a boat with two sick friends, one has a supernatural sensitivity and the other is already haunted, right in the middle of the ghost festival. Wow, that's like someone wanting to go skydiving without a parachute, a backup chute, or even a goggle. Just jumping straight down. You guys were lucky you ended up hanging from a tree instead. I remember it was 2002 and I was just in the second grade. It was during the Ghost Festival in July, and our family was discussing plans for ancestor worship with my aunt's family. So we decided to have dinner together that night. We lived in an old apartment building with 4 floors. My family was on the first floor and my aunt was on the 4th, so it was super convenient to meet up. I never liked the place. It was dark, damp, and gloomy, with poor lighting all year round. At night, there weren't even any lights in the hallway, which made it extra creepy. That afternoon, my mom and aunt started preparing dinner, and I told mom I was going out to play. She agreed and said dinner would be at 8 and she'd call me when it was ready. I grabbed my toy and found a sandpit not far from our building and started playing. I was so into it that I completely lost track of time. Before I knew it, it was pitch black, and I hadn't heard my mom call for me. I was tired by then, so I decided to head back home. As I was getting up, a boy who looked like he was in middle school walked over to me with a grin and said, "Hey kid, can I see your toy?" I assumed he just wanted to play, so I handed it to him. He took my toy train, looked at it from different angles, and then suddenly turned and ran off with it. I was stunned. Someone actually stole a broken toy. I immediately chased after him, shouting, but I lost him around the corner. For a kid, that was a huge deal, and I ended up crying all the way back home. Maybe I was too busy crying, but I somehow found my way back to my home and knocked on the door. No one answered. Oh, right, they're at my aunt's place. So I groped around in the dark, started climbing up the stairs. Even though it was just 4 floors, but I feel like I was climbing forever. Finally, I reached my aunt's place and knocked on the door. It opened almost instantly, and my mom was there. But she stood behind the door, staring at me with a blank expression. Her hair was tied in a bun, and she wore a plain, old-fashioned outfit I had never seen before. I ran straight into her arms, crying about how my toy got stolen. She stiffly hugged me back like a robot. She just said a few half-hearted things to comfort me and then let me inside. As soon as I stepped in, I noticed the room felt wrong. Normally, my aunt's living room had bright white lights, but that night, it was this dull yellowish glow, and only the living room light was on. My aunt, uncle, and dad were all sitting around the dining table, but they were sitting so still with blank faces. I asked my dad why they hadn't turned on the other lights, and he suddenly snapped, "Mind your own business." That moment, I was not sure if he was my father. Yes, he had never been a gentleman, but he never yelled at me like that before. So I was so hurt that I started crying again. And then something like nightmare happened. Everyone who had been quietly sitting at the table suddenly froze. Then all at once turned to stare at me. No one spoke, no one moved, and under that dim yellow light, their blank faces made the whole scene feel even more unsettling. I stunned, looking at them, too scared to make any move. After what felt like ages, my mom said, "Let's eat." But even her voice was stiff, completely devoid of any emotion. Then everyone just went back to what they were doing before, like nothing happened. Even as a little kid, I could tell something was seriously wrong. I just sat there, staring at them, while they all ate and watched TV, still with those blank faces. I followed their gaze to the television, only to find the screen filled with static, showing nothing at all. At that point, I was on the verge of losing it. I tried to ask my mom why the TV wasn't working, and she coldly replied, "It's broken." Then, my dad, who had been knitting with his head down, suddenly looked up and glared at me with this fierce expression, as if wanting to kill me. At that moment, I was sure he was definitely not my dad. "Mom, I left my toy downstairs. I'm going to grab it," I said, not knowing where I found the courage. My aunt suddenly chimed in, "It's so dark out. Let your brother go with you." No, it's okay. I'll be right back." I forced myself to stay calm, got up, and walked toward the door, feeling their eyes follow me the entire way. My hands were shaking as I opened the door, and as soon as I stepped out, I slammed it shut and bolted down the stairs. Every hair on my body was standing on end, and I had only one thought. I needed to get out of here. I ran as fast as I could, and when I reached the second floor, I heard the door upstairs creak open. I thought they were coming after me, and I started crying out of fear. I burst out of the building and ran to the street. When I turned the corner, I saw my mom looking anxious and waiting for me. She still had her hair down and was wearing her white shirt. She was my real mom. I ran to her and collapsed into her arms, shaking uncontrollably. She noticed something was wrong and just scolded me a bit for wandering around, then took me back home. When we got back, I instantly told my family what happened, and my mom's face went pale with fear. My dad, who's really into all that ghost stuff, immediately got some joss paper and burned it at the door. Not long after, we moved out of that place. I was so traumatized that I rarely visited my aunts after that. Even now, I still have nightmares where I'm running through that building, and behind me, my family stands there, staring with those blank faces. So, was this a slip into a parallel universe? In my opinion, from the moment the narrator started chasing that boy who grabbed the toy, he might have already entered another world. He feels like he's been climbing those stairs for ages, and that could really be true. But what are those things pretending to be his family? Maybe they are alternates? Anyway, the Ghost Festival in China is definitely not a cheerful holiday. Throughout the whole month of July, we usually pay close attention to all kinds of details, like trying not to go out at night, staying away from places where accidents happened, and avoiding discussions about ghosts. Speaking of which, I remember something that happened when I was 13. Back then, we lived in a housing complex provided by the company, so everyone in the neighborhood knew each other. On the night of the Ghost Festival, my dad wanted to hang out with a security guard, and I wanted to tag along. My mom initially said no, because it was a special holiday. But after some persuasion, and with my dad there, she finally agreed. Unsurprisingly, something went wrong that night. My dad chatted with the guard for a while, and I got bored, so I asked going out to play on the swings in the nearby sandy area, which was only about 30 meters away. My dad agreed. I don't know what I was thinking. It was already pretty dark, and the old lights weren't very bright. But I didn't care at all, just swinging by myself in the dark. And when I got home that night, I started running a fever. I ended up in the hospital for days, but nothing helped. Eventually, they thought maybe I'd been followed by some spirits, so they took me to visit a psychic. She checked my pulse, then knelt in front of a shrine to pray. After a bit, she said a ghost had indeed followed me, and it happened exactly that night. It turned out that sandy area used to be a graveyard. When they built the housing complex, the construction team contacted the families of the deceased to relocate them. But one grave was never claimed. Finally, with no other choice, they just covered it up and built over it. So that night, I was swinging on a coffin. The coffin inside contained a middle-aged man. Due to being left unattended for a long time, he had become a wandering ghost around that area. Seeing me, a weak child, he decided to follow me and ask for some money. In the end, my family burned paper offerings for him and he left. But after that, every time I went out at night, my mom would pin a needle tied with a red thread to my clothes, and for a long time, no one dared to play in that area at night again. So that's all for this video. Next time, we'll be covering the trending online post. So stay tuned.